Welcome back, everyone. If you attended our first or our second or both of our Forecastr Fridays, welcome. If this is your first Forecastr Friday, today is our third and final Forecastr Friday. As a reminder, the first part in this three-part series we did 2 weeks ago, which was how to build a great financial model. Last week's Forecastr Friday was Logan teaching us how to use the financial model to raise capital and close checks. And today we're going to cover how do you use the model and how you use the capital you raise as indicators to know how to manage your money. And as I like to think of it, like spend like you've been there before, especially as we see, shifts in the market. How do you use this as a guide to extend your runway and not run out of cash before you realize it? Quick reminder, the reason I wanted Logan and his team and Forecastr to be doing this is because with Startup Hype Man, as many of you are aware, we're working with founders all the time on their pitch. And if that pitch is a fundraising pitch where they're looking to raise capital, one of the biggest questions that comes up over and over again is on like, how much should we raise? Like, do you have any suggestions for our financial model? Does this look like it's an accurate LTV? And unfortunately, without a finance background myself, I'm often left to say, sorry, we are not finance experts. Please find someone who's an expert in finance to help you with those things. And everything that Logan's been hitting us with the last couple of weeks has been tremendously helpful. Those of you who have been here towards having answers to those questions, even on your own. And so now we want to bring this entire thing together to see, okay, how do we use everything we've learned to make the right decisions with our money moving forward? And with that, Logan, the floor is yours. I'm looking forward to you wowing us once again.
I love it. Well, I will try not to disappoint, but the first thing I'm going to do is, okay, I thought I wasn't going to be able to share my screen, but I can. So can you guys see this? We good? All right. Well, once again, thank you all for having me and Forecastr back to talk shop about financial modeling. Today, we're going to be focusing mostly on how to use a financial model to supercharge your business. So the unfortunate fact is that the vast majority of people that we talk to, they think of financial modeling and projections as a fundraising document, right? They think of a financial model as something that they construct for a fundraise, they use it to pitch their business, they put it in a data room, they send it to investors, then they either get the check or they don't. But regardless, once it's done, the vast majority of people put the financial model on a shelf, they forget about it until the next time that they need to go and fundraise, where they dust it off, they update it, and then they do the whole process over and over and over again. So we believe that that is a huge, huge mistake, and it's a huge opportunity for a lot of businesses out there. Right? For those of you all that were on my previous two talks, you know that a financial model is like a simulation for your business. It's kind of like a windshield of a car, right? If you're driving a car and you don't have a windshield, then you're not going to be able to see where you're going. A financial model is your windshield. It's your glimpse into the future so that you can make the best decisions, know where to optimize, all of that. So it's really just increasing your chances of success with your business. So it's going to do things like help make sure that you don't run out of cash. So you're lengthening your runway, knowing which metrics to focus on, communicating with all of your employees what their targets are for the metrics that they're in charge of, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is how to take this great financial model that we built, that we maybe use to fundraise, but then embed it deep within our business so that we can start to see the benefits of that level of like transparency that we get, communication, target setting, all of that good stuff. So I covered an intro in the past too, but if this is the first time that you've joined with us, I do think that it's important every time for you to know who's talking to you and what gives me the right to say everything that I'm going to be saying. So as Raj said, I'm Logan Burchett. I'm co-founder, chief operating officer here at Forecastr. Been in finance pretty much my entire career, been a finance nerd ever since that I graduated from college. So I went and got my MBA in finance at Xavier University, managed the Kentucky Pension Fund for a number of years, managed about $18 billion, or about 53% of $18 billion, about $9 billion personally. Eventually left, became a fractional CFO for a bunch of really, really cool startups, helped them raise money, helped them build financial models. Eventually, I, saw all kinds of problems with the financial modeling process, which led me to starting Forecastr. Forecastr's got about 550 clients, raised about $5 million, team of 33 folks. So know the finance game better than most folks that you're likely to meet. And of course, my co-founder Steven's here on the slide next to me. And again, we touched on this the past two, but I'll just hit on it really, really quickly again. What is Forecastr? Well, it's an online software that helps founders build great financial models so that they can understand their numbers, make better decisions, and get funded. So the previous conversation that we had, the previous talk last Friday, was mostly around the get funded piece. This one is going to be mostly around understanding your numbers and making better decisions. So in general, what we're trying to do is we're getting finance and financial modeling. We're essentially making it easier to understand by all the key stakeholders, right? Financial modeling has always been a big part of businesses, bigger businesses, because they have departments that are centered around finance, understanding finances, projecting finances, all of that stuff. But smaller startups have been neglected here. It's always been really, really challenging. Most founders don't really know how Excel works, and they certainly don't know a ton about finance. So that's where we come in. We have a great team and a great software that's going to help get you a great financial model, show you how to use it, make sure that it's always up to date, point out some cool stuff that you can do in your business with it. And that's why we exist. Our best feature, we're constantly told, is our team of analysts. So whenever you do choose to become a customer of Forecastr, 30-day white glove onboarding, and then the analyst is going to continue to check in with you throughout the entirety of your subscription. So if anybody here is interested in checking out Forecastr, Calvin, maybe now would be a good time to just throw a link to the beta in the chat, and then we'd love to chat with everybody. But now, getting into the content here a little bit, I want to set the stage by talking at a very high level about what are the big areas of a financial model, right? The key areas of a financial model, because there's a lot kind of going on. If you're looking at like maybe a 50-tab spreadsheet, it's hard to kind of understand all the nuances. So it's, I think, really important to kind of start at the high level and then dig in a little bit deeper. So in general, we think of there as being really 4 key areas of a financial model. It's kind of how we think about things. So the first one is going to be the growth plan. You can also call this like a customer acquisition plan if you'd like. Essentially what this is it's a section of your financial model that's entire purpose is articulating how you're going to grow the business, right? You don't want to just say, I have 100 customers last month, I'm going to grow that by 10% forever. And then that's how I'm going to grow my business, right? That's not very helpful. That's not helpful to you, not helpful to investors, really not helpful to anybody. What you want to do is you want to break it down to the channel level so that if you are saying, hey, I'm going to get 100 new customers this month, you have specific goals by channel for how you're going to be getting those 100 customers. So it's like, I'm going to get 20 from paid ads. I'm going to get 10 from direct sales. I'm going to get, whatever it is, whatever your mix is, you've got goals within that. And then you've got metrics within those goals. And we'll get into that a little bit more deeper into the presentation. But the first section is, how am I going to grow this thing, right? How am I getting my new customers? Then we've got the revenue section, which is, okay, now I've got these great customers. How do I turn them into dollars, right? How do I transform these people that are paying me some amount of money? What does that look like? So if you've been on my previous talks, this is where the revenue formula really comes into play. So we have to understand, is it a subscription? Are they paying me every month? If so, what are the goals for my churn rate, right? Is it a one-time thing? Is it a transaction, right? How much money am I going to get from that? This is where you get kind of the unit economic level of detail. It's where you can identify things like LTV and really important and useful metrics. So in general, you want to think, how am I growing? How am I getting customers? And then how am I turning those customers into dollars, and what does that look like? And again, we'll go through each of these individually in much greater detail kind of as we progress. So those are the first two. The third one that we like to think about is the expense budget. So this is like, the first two are mainly around cash coming into the business. This is the first one that's really focused on cash coming out of the business. What are the things that you need to pay for? Biggest ones for most of us are probably going to be our people, right? So who's on the team? Who are the upcoming hires that we're focused on getting in? What other major expenses do we have? Where are we allocating budget? And then making sure that you stick to that once it's set every single month. Very, very important. And then the final one that we like to think of is the capitalization plan. So most of us aren't profitable. I would say we're certainly not profitable. We're relying on venture funding to make sure that we don't, the business doesn't die along our way to growth. So understanding at a deep level, what's your runway, right? What are the metrics that you need to hit in order to go out and raise whatever the next round is that you're wanting to raise, right? If it's a seed round, what do I need to do to get to maybe 10K of MRR or whatever you're looking to get to there? If it's a Series A, what do we need to do to get to over 100K of MRR, and so on and so forth. So understanding that, and then also understanding your plan for bringing that in, right? Are you going to do debt? Are you going to do equity? What is it going to look like? When are you going to start the process? All of that. So these are kind of when we think about big areas, big sections of a financial model, these are kind of the big four that we talk about. Okay. So we're going to come back and we're going to look more granularly at each of those sections individually, just so that we make sure that we all understand that. But before we do that, I kind of want to dive into like what that cadence looks like, right? Like when should I look at it, and when should I reset it and all of that. So in general, we recommend focusing heavily on quarterly forecasts for each individual areas of your financial model. So you'd have like a quarterly forecast because it all fits together. You'd have essentially a forecast for the revenue, for the customer acquisition, all of that stuff. Now, your forecast is obviously going to span much greater than one quarter, but when it comes to like operationalizing your forecast or basically executing your plan, it's important to focus on specific goals and kind of a banded time frame, right? The analogy that I like to use is sprints for developers. So the targets that are set in the forecast, they can essentially become your OKRs or objectives and key results. If anybody's familiar with kind of the entrepreneur operating system, OKRs is a big piece of that. So essentially what that is like what's in my financial model becomes my goals for the quarter is another way of saying that. So if you set up a process and think of it in terms of quarters, it allows you to track the targets that you set for yourself comparing forecast to actual. So I can real time get a sense like, am I on track to do what I hope to do in the quarter? Or am I not on track to do what I hope to do in the quarter? Then at the end of the quarter, you're going to do a reforecast, and that's going to give you new targets that are going to be new OKRs for the next quarter. And then this allows you to do all kinds of cool stuff where at the end of the quarter, you can do a retroactive, a deep dive into what went well, what didn't go well. And because you outlined all the metrics that you're hoping to hit, you can get really granular and understand it at a very, very deep level. And you can also share kind of the outcomes of this with your team, your investors, whoever it makes sense to share it with. Okay. So I promise we kind of go through each of these individually, the big four areas. We're into the big four areas now. I want to jump in first and talk about the growth plan, right? The first area of the financial model, the growth plan, customer acquisition plan, what have you, whatever you want to call. Apologies that these dates at the top, if you're looking at this, they're going to be out of date. So we're just going to have to kind of like look at this as if it were June, July, whatever of 2022. But regardless of the dates, you can see what I mean whenever I say that we should look at a detailed quarterly targets, right? In this case, we kind of have our model sectioned out by quarters, and then we have individual targets broken out for each individual growth channel that we're looking at. So by looking at the forecast, we can see that in this hypothetical company, we're relying on a lot of social media advertising and influencers in order to grow. So if we say that we're in May of 2022, in this current quarter, Q2, you can get a sense of the growth strategy of this company and the areas that we need to focus on if we're going to try to drive new customers and hit these goals. So in this case, because we've really thought through this and thought through how we're going to be getting our individual customers, we can note that maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense to focus a lot of time doing prep work for conferences in this case, right? Because we can see that our target for this channel is just 2 new customers for the entire rest of the quarter. So if I focus a ton of time on conferences and I'm like, yeah, at best we're hoping to get 2 customers, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But we should, however, spend a lot of time optimizing maybe our Facebook advertising strategy. And we want to make sure that we hit that mark there because that's where a lot more of our customers coming in. So this is kind of like the risk area of the forecast, right? If we don't execute on Facebook, because this is kind of where we envision the most success coming from in our forecast, we're really unlikely to hit our revenue forecast, right? If we miss big on that, that's the biggest area of risk in our business. So, in this case, let's say we do spend adequate time, focus, energy and we still come wildly under forecast, maybe it makes sense to test another growth channel next quarter or something like that. It allows you, when you focus in this way, to get really, like, you set targets of like, success will be this, right? This is what I hope to do. This is what success will be like. And then whenever you do it, you can compare what success was in your mind to what success was in actuality, right? So then you can choose, once you get that data, is this a channel that we want to continue to scale? Are the unit economics still good? Do we still feel like there's things that we could do here to make this better? Or do we need to take another look at a different customer acquisition channel and keep trying different things, and get that to the point where we can scale it? So
I think, can I hop in for a sec?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is so important, because if you don't have these things documented, it's really, and I say this from past personal experience, it's really easy to fool yourself into thinking something is working better than it actually is. And I would say 99% of the time, if it's an idea we came up with, we are going to err in the direction that it is working better than it's working worse than it actually is. So unless you actually put the numbers down and force yourself to track what the conversion rate on something is, there's a high chance that something is working worse than what you assume it is. So please do this for all your funnels. Make sure it doesn't have to be that in depth. Just get some of the high level numbers out of the way. Like, what are the inputs and what are the outputs?
Yeah, that's a really, really great point, Raj. One way that I've heard it described is that entrepreneurs have permanent happy ears. You know what I mean? Like, they default whenever something happens, they just, like, it's such an emotional roller coaster that, let's say I get 2 or 3 customers from paid ads. We're just like, oh, heck yeah, like, paid ads is working, like, keep dumping money. But if you really take the time to look at it, it could very well be a completely unprofitable channel. Like, you may have gotten 3 customers, spending, with a CAC that's enormous compared to your LTV. And so this type of, like, diligence on it really forces you to be objective. And, like, before it happens, say, this will be a good channel if this happens. This will be a good month if this happens. This will be a good quarter if this happens. And then march towards that. So it kind of, like, keeps you honest whenever it comes to that type of stuff. So the other good thing about this too is, like, whenever you think about it in this way and you kind of section things out by quarters, you can really prepare yourself for larger growth channels that you see coming down the pipeline. If this pertains to you, right? If you're still, like, testing out new growth channels, or if you're making something kind of, like, transformational in your business. But in this plan, you'll see that, like, while we have kind of diversified growth channels, there's this, like, massive component of growth. And I did this on purpose just to kind of, like, drive the point home. But for this one, it's like, there's a massive component of growth coming down the line from influencers. So you can see in Q2, I'm getting, like, nothing from influencers, but this particular company, it looks like they're really betting the house on, like, an influencer strategy, right? That is, like, going to be their big growth play. So in this case, since, like, this is expected to be such a massive part of the company's future growth, as managers of the business, we need to be, like, all hands on deck in Q2. We got to prep for this new marketing channel, right? We got to prep. We got to get the influencers. We got to get the agreements in place. We got to figure out what our copy is going to be. We're going to do, like, there's a whole host of things that we're going to do. And if you look at it in this way and you set goals in this way, and you're like, look, I got to get 90 new customers from influencers in July of 2022, in Q2, what the mark is. So you should really think through kind of, like, what you need to do if you're actually going to hit that. Right, and be really pragmatic about it, right? So just
Ken had a question here in the chat asking, if specifically within Forecastr, is a funnel like what we would see set up for each revenue stream in Forecastr?
Yeah. So I'll maybe say it a little bit differently, and we're going to get into Forecastr kind of, like, at the end of it, so you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But basically, we do bottoms up financial modeling exactly like this, where we go through and identify all of the customer acquisition channels that you use and give you specific goals for each one individually. Then you're right, attach it to that revenue stream. But you can kind of choose to do whatever makes sense for your business. Like, if you have perhaps 3 different revenue streams, that all of those customers go to all 3 revenue streams, then we can set it up like that. Or if I'm like, this acquisition funnel goes to this revenue stream, but then this one goes to that one, and then this one goes to that one, we can set that up as well. So it's very customizable. And we can set it up however it makes sense for your business. So good question though. And we'll get into that here in just a second. We'll kind of show what it all looks like. So we're going to keep going. This is still growth, right? So I'm just going to go a little bit deeper on growth where now we're going to look at like how deep you want to track these or how deep you want to forecast it, right? And this is really where it comes down to, like, to Raj's point, like if all you can do is this right here, basically just the high level targets, if that's it, if that's all you can do, that's better than most people, right? That's better than most startups will do. But we go a little bit deeper than this, and this is kind of like what our recommendation is, and it really depends on how far along you are as your business. But the way that we like to think about it is we like to track and put goals for all of the controllable inputs that we have for the business. So I'll use an example, which is direct sales in this case. So you can see that, like, if we're in May, we're forecasting that we're going to get 4 new customers from direct sales. But we like to ask, okay, let's take a few steps further than that. How are we getting those 4 customers, right? Like, there are goals within that 4 customers goal for us to understand, like, how specifically we're going to get to that. So in this case, the salesperson is going to start by reaching out to 100 people, and this could be by calling them, sending emails, whatever works for this business, right? But it starts at 100. That's where the leads are. It starts at 100. Of those 400 people that they're reaching out to, we can set a goal based off of past data or whatever of getting 10% of them to agree to an in-person meeting. So I call 10 of them, I get 10 people out of the 100, or I'm sorry, I call 100 of them, I get 10 out of the 100 to agree to meet with me in person. Then from there, you get 80% of those people, or 8, to follow up with the demo. And then you're able to convert 50% of them into a paying customer. So by setting each stage individually like this, you can figure out kind of like what you need to hit and like where you're falling short and where you can optimize, right? So if I'm midway through the month, let's say I'm in May and I'm like halfway through, and I'm like, look, I've only called 30 leads, right? I've only called 30 people. Well, if I'm going to hit this forecast, like based off this data, I need to call 70 more people before the end of the month if I'm going to give this its fair shot, right? I mean, there could still be things go wrong. My conversion rates could go wrong, but like, I can control how many people I call. And if I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't have my 4 customers yet, and I'm like halfway through, and maybe I've got like 1 whenever I need 4, but I've only called 30 people, there's your answer. Like, just get more dials, right? Get on the phone more, send more emails, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is for your company. So this is just like a really good way to not only like understand how many customers you're going to get in aggregate, but specifically, what do I have to do to get those customers? And of course, you would share this with the team. You'd share this with your salesperson or whatever, so they know what's expected of them. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper than that even. So once you do it, if you do it in this way, if you put together kind of like the individual steps, the individual metrics that you hope to hit at the end of the month, this is where that forecast versus actual comes in, right? This is where you can really look and dig deep and see what went wrong and all of that. So in this case, in this example, we fell short of our outreach target, right? We said we wanted to do 100. We only reached out to 83 people, but we still hit our targets for companies making it to the first meeting. And then we fell short on demos and the final conversion down to the last 2 customers, which tells us that it's the last 2 steps of the process that needs more work, particularly converting at the demo, right? Because I mean, look, we didn't reach out to as many people as we wanted to. We actually reached out to less. We didn't get to 100, but we still got to where we wanted to be on the demo, on the meeting. We still got to 11. So something in that step seems to be working. Like, our copy is good, right? It's not a copy issue. It's just simply like, that conversion rate is good. The issue is converting at the demo and then converting down to the new customers, because that's where we really missed our mark. So once we know that, we can do all kinds of stuff, right? Like, once we've identified that, like, if I just looked at it and said, I wanted 4 customers and I got 2, then it'd be really tempting just to say, okay, double the amount of people that you reach out to, which, yeah, I mean, you could get there doing it that way, but our funnel is showing us that we could probably make a bigger impact with the same amount of leads if we just instead really looked at our demo flow, right? And like, made sure that it was as tight as could be. Maybe try out new softwares, note-taking app, whatever it is, prepare for the demo more ahead of time, tailor it to the person, right? All kinds of stuff that you can do once you kind of understand where you want your conversion rates to be, and then measuring them against where they actually are. So that's how you really optimize a funnel. That's how you can use a forecast to really optimize a funnel, by just setting targets of like, this is what success looks like, breaking it down and tracking it for each step of the funnel. So that way you can know, where to optimize. So I'll throw an example for how this is, so important with Forecastr, right? So Forecastr, I mean, we get between 200 and 300 beta applications every single month. And we get, between maybe 50, 60, maybe up to 70 customers per month. And so for us, we're always wondering, do we need to increase the number of beta applications just through paid ads, like get more leads in the door? Or are there things that we can do to just, with the same amount of leads, just get more customers by optimizing our conversion rates? And we actually, we changed our conversion rate. We focused on our conversion rate. We didn't pump any more top of funnel because our problem was in the conversion rate in our forecast. And we increased our conversion rate in this past quarter from demos to customers from 36% to 46%, right? Just by focusing on it, right? Just by, instead of focusing on getting more leads, optimizing the conversion rate. So really important stuff, super, super helpful when it comes to operationalizing your forecast. Cool. All right. So that's kind of the growth section of it. Now I want to take a look at the revenue plan, right? So we've forecasted how we're getting new customers. Now it comes into, all right, now we got to translate those new customers into dollars. So here you can see that like new subscriptions line that's actually coming directly from our growth plan. And just to prove it, I'm going to go back. You can see 16, 15, 111, 124. Those are all the numbers that we had in our growth plan. Skip ahead. Those are the same numbers that we have in our revenue plan. So these two are connected, right? These two belong together. They're connected to each other. So now we can take those new customers and we can allocate by percentage who's buying what product, right? And this is going back to the question that was asked, can we point different growth funnels to different revenue streams? Now, in this example, we're just going to assume that this company has one product to sell to keep it simple. In reality, we could break that up and route customers to different products, but we'll just keep it simple for this one. But we're also, so we've got our new customers. We've also got to factor in some other key components of the model, like churn, right? We know, I mean, if you were here for the past couple of presentations that we give, you really want to focus on the inputs and where you can be and where you can optimize and have goals for those as well. So in this particular revenue formula, there's really only two inputs to focus on, which is churn and price. Everything in conversion rates and getting new customers, those are all handled in the customer acquisition or the growth section of the app. Now we're just really focused on ACV or price, and then churn, and having a goal for that. But that's just as important, right? In this case, they just want to keep price steady, right? They just want their price to be $100 per month. So there's really not a whole lot to do there. In Forecastr's case, for example, we want to get our blended annual churn rate from about 40-ish% down to like 25%. So every month, every quarter, we have a goal for what does our churn rate need to be. And we do a forecast versus actual. So we know what's working, what's not working. And that way, once we've defined using math and using a model what success looks like, when we're deviating from that success, we know where to focus our time and energy. Okay. So now we're moving on to the cost section of the model. And this is really getting into budgeting, right? A lot of people call this section, a budget. But in this example, we're going to look at a specific area of a company's budget, which is salaries and benefits. And the main reason that I focus on that is because I said earlier, that's almost always going to be your biggest expense as a startup is your people. So in your model, you're going to want to do this for all spending categories like rent, marketing, sales, all of that stuff, commissions, whatever it is. But in this case, we're just going to be focusing on the hiring plan. So you can get a sense of kind of the things that you need to do, even by just looking at a hiring plan. So here we're expecting to increase the CEO salary in August, as well as hire a chief of staff and some sales and marketing folks. And each of these lines is important because not only of their cost impact and making sure that you're going to not run out of money, that is important. But they're also KPIs that you can focus on in the quarter. So if, for example, the plan is to hire a chief of staff in Q3, similar to the influencer example that we used earlier, there's probably some things that you need to do before Q3 in order to be doing that and in order to be getting them in. So like writing job descriptions, posting on job boards, like trying to get leads for that, interviewing, all of that good stuff. This is also an important communication tool for the vision of your company. So in this case, we can see that because this company is growing sales and marketing team aggressively, I mean, you can infer that these people are probably past product market fit and they're trying to grow, right? They're trying to dump kind of like gas on the fire and grow. So this is important in controlling costs as well as building towards the overall company vision. It's really important for both of them. And then last but not least, we're going to be talking about the capitalization plan. So just like with the hiring plan, the targets and the amounts raised indicate the actions that you're going to be taking in order to prepare for these rounds. So in this example, this company is hoping to close a $1 million seed round by the end of June. So what do you need to do in order to hit that KPI? Well, I mean, you're going to have to do a lot of final tasks closing out the round, like wiring instructions, like making sure that every dollar hits the bank account, also good stuff like that. But it's also good to outline a rough plan for future capitalization. So in this case, it's like, if I'm closing a seed right here, right now, then the subsequent quarters, it could be 18 months, 24 months, everything is building towards a Series A. So what do I need to do? What are the milestones that I need to hit in order to make sure that that goes off without a hitch? And then we're constantly just making sure that we're on that path, right? Are we on that path of a Series A? And if we're not, how do we course correct and get way out ahead of it if something goes wrong? So, okay, so once you've set your plan for each of these key areas, it's really important that we track against the plan. That's like, it all comes down to like tracking and execution. Otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to put together all this logic, all of these goals, and then like, what does it matter, right? You're not actually following along and tracking it. So in the example above, you can see how we've inputted our actual data next to our forecast, and you can see how your forecast looks in comparison to what actually happened historically. So you can really get a sense, even just at a high level, of looking like side-by-side comparisons. Is my forecast reasonable? Is this roughly in line with what has happened in the past? And it forces you, if you do this, to do a forecast versus actual every month, which we showed earlier in the presentation, where you can kind of like see what actually happened versus what I wanted to. We recommend taking time to go through and do this on a monthly basis. Make sure that everything is updated in your financial model. Do a variance report. That's the best way to make sure that you're on top of your numbers. If you're a Forecastr customer, we can do this for you. It's one of our paid packages. So we can go in, we can make sure your model's up to date. We can run a variance analysis. We can inform you of the big things that we saw in the forecast. And that's really what helps make sure that you stay on top of runway. You identify any abnormalities. Maybe you had a giant bump in some spending category that you weren't aware of, or maybe your churn was much higher than you anticipated and things like that. It helps you zoom in and focus on where your plan is kind of diverging from reality. So I'd love to take you guys through a real world example. I've actually got Forecastr's financial model up right here, so I can kind of give you a sense of how we do this, like for ourselves, right? We talked a lot about theory here, but now I'm going to show you that we practice what we preach. We put our money where our mouth is, and this is actually what we do for our own company. So some orientation here. You can see that everything on this screen corresponds with what we talked about in the presentation. So I've got this customer acquisition section. That's the same thing as growth, right? What we just talked about, customer acquisition, growth, same things. Revenue streams, that's the revenue section, right? So that you can plug those two together. People and expenses, these are both kind of that budget section. This is where you can plan where you're going to be spending your money. Then we have assets liability, which I left out of the presentation just to make it a little bit simpler. But then this equity is the capitalization plan, showing how you're going to be paying for the party, right? So going through here, I can see exactly where we want to be in January, right? And this is important because every member of our team, especially people on the growth team, because I'm in the growth section, there's no question what we want to hit. What is our goal for January? We got to get 57 customers, right? It's right here in our model. Everybody in our company has a link to our model. Everybody can see where we want to be. And we even give you goals for how you're going to hit that 57 customers. So if I'm looking at, for example, these other strategic networks, right? We're saying that we want to get 21 new customers from strategic networks. How do we want to get that? well, I can expand and I can even get a sense of like, what do we need to hit if we're actually going to hit this metric, right? So in this case, we want to have 171 partners up and running, active partnership agreements that we have, and we need to get leads from those partners. So we have a goal of getting 0.4 leads per partner, and that's going to get us 68 beta applications. You know, if you just do that math, it's 171 times 0.4. That's going to get 68 beta applications. With our conversion rate of our sales team, we can get 51 of those down to deals and then 21 of those down to new customers. Right. So we can see at a very granular level, not only what we want to hit in January, but how we plan on hitting that. And it scales throughout the entire model. So if I want to see, you know, where do we need to be at the end of the year of 2023? If we're going to hit this goal, if we're going to hit this forecast, you know, we need to have 250 partnerships up and running, referring us customers, and we need to maintain this leads per partnership of 0.4. And we can track that. We can see if it's going off the rails, right? If we're diverging from this plan, we can see where, and because we can get out way ahead of it, we can even maybe throw resources towards it to de-risk this. So let's say that we're middle of the year, we're in July, and we've only got 180 partnerships, right? Let's say that we're way off track. And Jeff is on the call with us. He's our director of strategic networks. But Jeff might say, "Look, guys, like I'm driving as hard as I can, but I just can't. There's not enough hours in the day. I can't get it." Well, then maybe we can hire another partnerships person to like help Jeff out or something like that, right? Just to help give him more firepower. The point is, we can get well ahead of it, and then we can give it the resources that we need in order to hit the goals that we want to hit. But you can only do that if you forecast on a metric level like this.
And this is where, like, again, like this comes up a lot in the pitch creation conversations. Like, you know, we'll talk about go-to-market strategy, and a lot of times, you know, what we're doing on our side is kind of almost helping like coach what that strategy needs to be, because if you haven't thought through it, like if you haven't thought through it, or if you're misguided in your assumptions, it can, if you think, bring it back to pitching, it can throw the entire pitch off. Like one example is if you take like the strategic networks and partnerships, like a lot of times when we're working with startups and we'll be like, okay, like what's your go-to-market here? And they'll highlight partnerships. And my response will say, okay, what do you mean by partnership? And they don't really have a response to that. And actually, a lot of times, funny enough, they'll just start explaining what their product does. And I'm like, no, that's not the question here. My question is, what does a partnership look like for you? And then we have to kind of talk through, okay, well, like who makes a good partner? What are you going to bring to them? What do you expect to get from them in return? Have you thought through like what an active partner looks, you know, there's a difference between having a partnership versus an active partnership. So like that level of specificity, not that you have to say all those things up front in a pitch, but being able to at least like let on that, you know, that 10 partnerships means 7 of them are going to be hyperactive, which is going to bring you 5 customers every month from those 7 partnerships, which is 35 a month, off of no cost partnerships. Like that level of clarity into your business is not only going to be helpful to raise capital, but it also, coming back to kind of the point of today's topic, like it helps you run your startup better. Because then you don't chase the wrong, what's the phrase? Chase the wrong ducks. Is that a phrase? No, it's, well, I can't think of what the phrase is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you don't chase the wrong ducks or whatever the phrase is. You focus in the right areas. You focus on the golden goose.
Yes, there you go. You brought it home. Love it. No, I totally agree with that. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, and it makes logical sense when you say it, but like a lot of people don't run their businesses this way. But if I say I want to get to $100,000 of monthly recurring revenue by June, the best thing you can do is get literally a metric level plan for how you're going to do that and tell everybody who's responsible for doing it and showing it to them. Be like, are you here? Are you here? Are you here? Are you tracking along this plan? You know what I mean? So it's just really important. And it's really, really powerful whenever you put it into practice. I am cognizant of time. I know we got like 15 minutes left, so I'll just really quickly hit on these 2. So, for us, we do annual subscriptions. You can see that we all the way down to the metric level. Ours is more complex than a lot. We can go really, really deep here and understand where our churn rate needs to be, right? Where our ACV needs to be, all of that good stuff. And then we've got a people section to show who all is going to be hired. You can go all the way down to the person level. You can look at salary, start dates, all of that. And then in our capitalization plan, you can see we're actually in the middle of a fundraiser right now. So we're doing our Series A. We're hoping to close in $8 million by March of this year. So you can kind of see how we're planning on capitalizing the business here. So all good stuff. I think we've got this slide left. So I'll get through this and then we can open it up for questions. But I've kind of touched on this here and there, but I want to come back to the cadence. So like, what do we really recommend in terms of just like when to look at your model, when to use your model, all of that. So we don't want to like overburden the company, and we don't want to overburden management by like having to like be in this like too much. But I do think it's important to have a really healthy relationship with your financial model and go in pretty actively. So we say weekly, you want to just pop in, you want to just check and see, how am I tracking towards my goal for this month? So going back to that sales example, if I'm midway through the month and I know I got to call 100 people, have I gotten to about 50? Right? Am I about there? Do I need to speed it up? Can I slow it down? Whatever. Just like track in to say, where am I in my pursuit of this metric this month? Right? And just do that weekly. You don't necessarily have to make a meeting or a meeting with your team about that. You can really just pop in and just kind of like look at it. We do that. We have a weekly OKR meeting. But either way, we recommend kind of weekly looking at this. Monthly, we recommend having a dedicated monthly finance meeting. We used to make our customers do this whenever we were fractional CFOs. It's a monthly meeting where you go back, you do a retroactive of what happened last month, what happened this month, or what did you think was going to happen last month and what actually happened. That's where that variance analysis comes in. So that's where you're getting all the insights, right? What went wrong? What went well? Where do we need to focus? Where do we need to change the forecast? Whatever. So it just like gets you a sense to really dive in on a deep metric level. And then quarterly, that's where you do that quarterly reforecast. So you've been marching towards the goals you set for last quarter. Once you get through that quarter, now you can reforecast using the data that you learned from the previous quarter. And then you've got a new set of goals, a new set of things that you want to achieve. If you do this over time, your forecast is going to get scary accurate. Just because you're getting better and better and better at collecting data, understanding your data, and things like that. The first time you do it, you're going to miss by a ton. The second time you do it, you're going to miss by less. By the time that, we've been doing this for like almost 3 years now, we've got like less than like 1 or 2% variance on our revenue forecast at this point, and expense forecast. We're dialed in. We know what our runway is. We know kind of like where we're going to be. So that's just kind of some of the benefits that you get from doing this process. And with that, that's kind of my whole spiel. I'll end it here because I want to make sure that we get through questions. Once again, 25% off anybody here that wants to check out Forecastr. Comes with an analyst, 30-day white glove onboarding. We'll be around forever to check in with you and make sure you're getting good value out of your forecast. So if you're interested, just apply for the beta that Calvin sent out. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Well, questions, you got, either drop them in the chat or use the Q&A feature for any questions you have, either on how to leverage a financial model for business decisions, or if you have any product specific questions about Forecastr, that's also appropriate to ask those as well.
Yep.
And while we're waiting for questions to come in, one question I have is, what advice do you have for how to make assumptions for some of the more like nebulous stuff? Like, for example, maybe it takes doing several webinars to know what your metrics are. So how could you make some assumptions beforehand to decide, well, this is the path we're going to explore and focus most of our time on?
Yep. It's a great question. And so and we get this a lot with like earlier stage companies that are like just getting out and like just figuring out what they're going to do. Basically, the way that we think about it, because we did this whenever we started the company, it's like we put some numbers kind of like in our forecast. We were like, we hope to hit this, but like we have no data, so we're just going to like try it. what we did is we looked at kind of like industry averages, right? What is the average conversion rate on a webinar, average attendance on a webinar? If you Google this stuff, I mean, you'll be surprised at what you can find. Like you can get like some good data on a lot of this stuff. And you can talk to mentors. Like we love talking to people when we're trying to figure things out. Find an expert, go talk to somebody and be like, what would success in this channel look like? And what should I hope for my first webinar? Right. So you can do that, like combine some like Google searches, combine talking to some people, and you'll get a sense of like, we'll be successful if we can do this, right? Like I'll give you a perfect example. We went to FounderCon this past year, right? So this was our first conference that we'd ever been to. We'd never really had any idea how conferences would work for us, but we just put in a goal of, we asked our team, we were like, what would success be like, right? If we went to this, what would we walk away? And we'd be like, we'd be happy if we got that. And we said 10 customers. If we can walk away from FounderCon with 10 customers, we're walking away with a big smile on our face, and we're going to be really happy about that. And we went to FounderCon and we got right on the nose 10 customers, right? That made that a profitable trip. That basically paid for everybody's flights and stay. And we got 10 new customers out of that. So sometimes it's just gut and being like, what would I like to see out of this, and then put that in and then refine it over time. And then of course you can do that analysis of what did it cost to get this? Okay, am I profitable on it? All of that good stuff.
I think as well, like hearing you say that makes me also think like, as long as you put something down, now you have something to work towards. Because if you go in there being like, well, we don't know what success we're looking at this conference, so let's just see what happens. Versus if you go in being like, we need to get 10, now everything you do at that conference is going to be in some way in the direction of how do we get 10 customers out of this? If you go in being, let's see what happens, you'll have no direction the entire time you're there. And then you'll walk out being like, was it successful? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of times it's just like having a goal. Because like I can tell you this right now, and I'm, Jeff was there with me, as was one of our analysts and my co-founder. If we had gone without a tangible goal of like, I want to get customers, like that's what we're actually trying to do, it would have changed our whole strategy. Like we wouldn't have done things that we did. We had a whole, we did like a massage type of thing. Like we had a massage chair where somebody sat down, they got a massage. It was called Take the Stress Out of Your Financial Model. And we would do a demo right there on the spot, and we try to close them. And like, we wouldn't have done that if we were like, let's just go to this conference and hang out and meet people. So I think it just like informs kind of like, what you're going to be doing, the behaviors, all of that. Goals are always good. So
that's great. We have Max asking, what if in your head you had said 12? Do you think you would have gotten to 12?
Oh, that is a existential question. Maybe. I don't know. That's a great question. Possibly. I mean, but if I did, then that would, I think, even further prove my point, which is like, set lofty goals and you're going to like drive like mentally really, really hard to hit those. So maybe we should have said 12, maybe we would have hit that. I don't know.
I think a lot of it depends on like, what is your, like, this may be the first time you're doing it for this company, but do you have any track record you can look to in the past of like how you've performed against a goal? And like, funny enough, like my CFO, Aaron, is on this right now. And one of the things he tells me, he's like, you tend to do about 70% of whatever goal you set. So let's set the goal higher. So that way it's basically, it would have been 100% of a lower goal.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say for OKR. 70% is the magic number. You want it to be just high enough that like, maybe you can't quite get it, but you can get pretty close. And 70% for OKRs is pretty close. What
else? Yeah, I have his questions, everybody.
Looks like Katie has one in the Q&A. Point that towards y'all.
Oh, great. Let's, whoops, I accidentally raised my hand. Katie asks, is LTV, long-term value, represented in the model on a channel level? And then the follow-up to that is, if Facebook ads is bringing in lots of new customers, but they churn out at the highest rate, how/where do I track that? Or maybe that's more of like a CRM thing.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And you can definitely track that in your financial model. So like if it's like kind of like a product level question, we could set that up in a key metric section of your account so that you could track kind of LTV by channel. And like you honestly should, like, that's like a really good thing to be able to track, because to your point, Katie, is like, you may have like a really high performing channel in terms of getting customers in the door. But if you're a subscription business, that same channel might have a crazy high churn rate. so that your LTV to CAC ratio is way off for that channel, right? So it is really good to get granularity and visibility of the LTV on a channel level. And it's just like really helpful to understand your unit economics. Basically, I like to slice and dice my unit economics in every way that I can, just to get as much visibility as I possibly can. So definitely your head's in the right spot. Definitely it makes sense to do that on a channel level. And that is something that we can set up for you in Forecastr in our product. So
what would you say is like, so let's say everyone who's on this call right now, let's say it's like a year from now and they've built a pretty solid company that's employing, I don't know, 30 people, something like that. They're well capitalized. Or let's say this was like a year ago. They did this a year ago and now it's today. And you've got a lot of these companies who now are all of a sudden like facing layoffs because they're like, oh, we didn't expect the market to do this. What are some of the like leading indicators a founder or CEO should be paying attention to so they're not all of a sudden like surprised and be like, oh my gosh, we are all of a sudden going to be out of runway if we don't fire half of our staff?
yeah, it's a really, really great question. I would say like in general, if you're tracking all of this and you know kind of like in your model, like one of the big key things in your model is going to be your runway. It's going to show you how much runway you have. And obviously, if you that's the runway that you'll have if you hit your model, right? If you hit your goals, if you hit your forecast. So that's why we say do quarterly reforecast and like really have more of an operational forecast. Because if my model says I've got 12 months of runway, but I make it through a quarter and I'm like, I didn't hit anywhere near these numbers, I got to reforecast that down and put these numbers more towards something that is like actually reasonable and realistic. Then that's going to shift my runway down, potentially significantly. So I'd say it's just the hygiene of making sure that I'm actually doing directionally what I said I'm going to do in my model. That's going to give me confidence in that runway number. But then the other thing, Raj, is like, especially if you're a company that's not profitable, as I'm sure most startups are, it's going to be a combination of that and understanding where my actual runway is and how easy will it be at this moment in time to raise capital, right? So like, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say that you just raised a big seed round. This is actually a real example I can use because this kind of happened to us. Let's say you just raised a seed round. It was like an institutional seed round led by a reputable VC. And you get like halfway through between your seed and the Series A, and you realize that you want to deploy more cash, like you're seeing maybe more growth and you want to like deploy more and you're going to need more money to do that. But you're in kind of a tweener spot where maybe you've got 30, 40K of monthly recurring revenue. So you're not to where you can raise a Series A, you've already raised a seed and there's like a spot in between, so just basically like understanding like when can I raise, but also like if like market conditions are really, really in a challenging spot, like let's say you got like 6-8 months worth of runway and you're like, I need to go raise money like here in the next like couple of months. And you're like, my revenue's not where I need it to be. My metrics aren't where I need it to be. And we're in a challenging fundraise environment. I don't think I can pull off a fundraise right now. Then it's kind of like all of that mental calculus coming together, using your financial model to say, well, if I cut these people, could I still reasonably hit these targets? And what would that do to my runway? Right. And having those kinds of challenging conversations. So it's that's kind of like how we like to think about it. It's kind of making sure that you're executing on the goals that you have in your plan and then squaring that with, can I actually get more cash in and capitalize the business? And then just kind of making your decisions based off of those two things.
Thank you for that. Let's go one more question and then just a couple of quick announcements before we close out. So Aaron is asking, we may be going into a recession, as you all know. Are there ways on the Forecastr platform to stress test, such as, let's say we lose all our contracts and have to float the company for 3 to 5 months while we rebuild our client base?
100%. That is one of our marquee features. It's scenario modeling. So we recommend everybody have a base case that they use for fundraising, at least 2 scenarios, at least a base case and then like a cash case. So the base case is like my realistic goals, the goals that I'm going to share with my team, everything that we're marching towards. And then you have more of an operational case where maybe it's the same like expenses and everything, but what if my revenue is significantly lower? Or my accounts receivable, my AR gets higher. Like people aren't paying their invoices on time, like whatever those metrics are, stress test them and plan your business off of that bad scenario, right? Like like, don't bet the company that you're going to hit this scenario that you're trying to get everybody to march towards. Plan your runway off of the scenario that, like, what if this doesn't go well, right? What if things don't happen as much as, you know, like what they say they're going to do in the model. So, but yes, you can absolutely do that.
Awesome. Well, before we depart today, I want to thank everyone for joining our Forecastr Fridays series. This was awesome these last 3 weeks. I got a ton of notes in my notebook from all 3 Fridays, and I know a lot of people here are already trialing out the software. If you haven't, be sure to scoop up that offer of, what was it, 25% off?
Yep.
Be sure to get in on that if you haven't already. I'll be doing a webinar with Forecastr in about a week or 10 days on February 7th. It is the webinar that many of you have been on before who are on this. It's how to not suck at pitching your startup. If you've never been before, please join. If you have been, come back for a return visit. It's our marquee flagship training on how to pitch, especially if you're raising capital. The other announcement I want to share with everyone is next Friday, February 3rd, which if you look at the calendar is 2/3/23. So Michael Jordan Day, AKA the day of the GOAT. Startup Hype Man is officially launching the GOAT to Market Club. If you liked the stuff you saw in these last 3 Fridays, imagine like how much more it's going to be turned up and how much more valuable knowledge and insight on how to grow your business you're going to get across marketing, sales, fundraising, and customer acquisition that we're going to be delivering inside the GOAT to Market Club. It's a members only community for founders, CXOs, and go-to-market leaders, where every month will be highlighted by a strategy drop, which is a mini workshop where we go deep on a very specific low to no cost GTM strategy. And the reason we're creating this club is because, as I mentioned at the beginning of this workshop, a lot of the questions that we get when we're building pitches is on go-to-market strategy. There's a lot of people who have misguided assumptions about their GTM strategy, and we want to have one place where we can help you with those strategy drops every single month. GOAT to Market Club comes in for less than the cost of nearly every other streaming network out there at just $9 a month. And your first month is free. And if you join as part of our pre-launch before next Friday, we've got even more bonus goodies for you, including access to our limited run of Startup Hype Man Believe the Hype t-shirts. So just reach out to me if you want to get in on our pre-launch. And I know I've already reached out to some of you about it as well. Would love to see you join, but this is going to be the community, the club that makes you the GOAT to market. Appreciate everyone for joining. Thank you again to Forecastr, who, by the way, Forecastr is one of our sponsors for GOAT to Market Club. Shouldn't forget to mention that. So thank you for helping support the launch. And we are super excited for that to come out soon. Next Friday, Michael Jordan Day, 2/3/23, GOAT to Market Club launches. We will see all of y'all when we see y'all next. Shout out again to Calvin and Logan for doing this series the last 3 weeks. Have a great Friday and go forth and prosper, as they say.
Thanks, y'all. It was a blast. Appreciate it.